And so we're now recording our cohort call for open hardware makers. And as usual, if you don't want to be on the recording, please turn off your video. Yeah, and I guess this is the main announcement that I'll make for today. And Alex, you can take it away.
Thank you very much. So this week's topic is road mapping, and not only this week's, you should already have met with your mentor and discussed this topic. As Andre already mentioned, and I will repeat it now, this call will be recorded except for the breakout rooms. We don't know if there will be breakout rooms today, depends on our time. Yeah, as Andre said, turn off your camera if you don't want your face in the recording, but please turn it on for breakout rooms, just nicer for conversation. We will upload the recordings to our YouTube channel, and well, as you know, all interactions must respect our community guidelines. And if you see any community guideline violation, or if there are any other problems, or you have questions, please send them to us to ohmmakers@gmail.com. But you should already know this email address because we are sending you emails all the time. Here was our icebreaker exercise, and Andre, may I ask you to read some of the favorite songs, just like some picks?
Yeah. So there's basically everything here I don't know, which is cool because I have new stuff to listen to. But there is one called by Mike is Danger Calling by Icon. Then we have Chiasmus, Looped, All of Me by John Legend, and Abby has put the Encanto soundtrack, which is, yeah, super cool because it's a nice movie. And also as a recent parent, I also like understand why this is one of the most liked songs on her list nowadays. Yeah.
All right, so just so you know where you are right now, we are currently in week 9, so more than half of the program is already over. What I already can tell you is that we are currently collecting the reviews of the expert review, and we are preparing packages for you, and you will receive your personal feedback soon. So until next week or at the beginning of next week. Just a quick recap before we start with the agenda for today. In week 7, we already talked about accessible docs, bill of materials, skills, and so forth, digital fabrication, and user and developer guides. And yeah, last week, and which is also on the agenda today, is road mapping, managing time, and evaluating risks. And yeah, you should already have read our like the respective section in our curriculum. It has a lot more information, and I'm saying this each call. And there is more and more information in the curriculum, and there are also the assignments you should work on. We are just like touching different topics. You should work there on your own and work on the assignments on your own. All right, we will begin today with a guest talk by Abby, and then afterwards we will just have a short discussion, also like a group discussion about road mapping. And last but not least, we want to talk a bit about evaluating risks for open source projects, open hardware projects. All right, Abby. I just quickly want to introduce you for our cohort. Yeah, well, you're currently leading the Mozilla developer engagement strategy around the trustworthy AI, open source, and the MozFest. And that the reason why we know you, or why we know each other, is because you founded and led the Mozilla Open Leaders. And in case we did not repeat this too much already, and you don't know, Open Hardware Makers basically originated from Mozilla Open Leaders. It was part of the last cohort where a lot of other similar programs were born. And you do a lot of many other amazing things in open science and like in general in open projects. And we can just not thank you enough for joining us today. And we are really looking forward to your presentation today, your introduction into road mapping. I will stop sharing now and give the word to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex. And actually, I probably should have told you this before the call. This is actually my last week at Mozilla. I'm joining GitHub next week. I haven't announced that yet, but I'll be leading their open source developer programs. I'm excited for that. But yes, I do that currently.
Cool. Congratulations on the new position.
Oh, thanks. Yes, thank you so much for having me here. Really excited to talk to you. Also, I noticed when I was looking through the notes, a lot of what Alex you have, it repeats a lot of what I was planning to do here. And I noticed, oh, you asked me to talk more about long-term projects. So I'll try to focus more on that. I'll skip over parts and you can ask me more about long-term projects too. Sorry, I missed that when I was preparing.
And quickly, I just want to say that I left this there because we have 2 cohorts, and for the next time, I will then do all the things which I listed there. So I also have a presentation about that, but we are so glad that you are here and can tell us a bit more things like firsthand. I just left it here in the document, so I'm not repeating this at all. We are more focusing on the discussion afterwards.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, then I won't change my presentation too much. But I'll share these slides. Can everyone see my slides? Awesome. Cool. So yeah, road mapping for open projects. I'm Abby. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Really happy to be here with you. But I want to start with a little bit on why a roadmap and why this is helpful for so many different people in the project. So first, for the project leaders, for you, a big reason why I first introduced road mapping to open leaders was around accountability. I just wanted project leaders to sort of map out what they plan to do during this mentorship program. That way, when they meet with their mentors, they have something to look at and say, like, are we meeting the milestones we set? Is there anywhere we need to adjust? And just a way for you to understand how far you've come, because it's hard to know that if you don't like set out goals at the beginning. And it's also a really good project management tool. It helps you keep focus. It just helps you delegate things and let people know where you're going. Another big reason why roadmaps are great is through partnerships. It can really help you generate that buy-in with stakeholders. So if you have a potential partner that says, hey, I need this feature, and you say, oh, it's on our roadmap, it'll be there in September, that's really powerful. So just being able to understand what your partners want or what your users need and putting that in the roadmap can really help with that buy-in. Then for your users, it's assurance that the product will meet their needs now and in the future. So if they know a big release is coming up that will help fix all their problems, they might be willing to give your product a try now. And then finally, for contributors, this really helps outsiders understand what's happening now and what's happening next. So that when outsiders come in, they know what they can do. So just to build on this piece with the contributors a bit, I'm taking this from some movement building theory. I'm really a big fan of Marshall Gans. But really, action requires 3 components. I think having your mission and vision is really important for outsiders to know what you're trying to accomplish and why this is important. But then the roadmap and having contributing guidelines and things like that helps them know how they can help you. And if you have a really cool mission, but you don't tell people how they can help, it can be really frustrating. Like you want to help, but you don't know how. So this way, it can just help address Marshall Gans calls it like the head and the heart will lead to the hands. So I like that. So today we're going to talk about the roadmap piece specifically, but a lot of different things are part of that how and how people can help. So what goes in a roadmap? So this is the Mozilla style roadmap. We have 3 parts here. The first 2 are optional, but first is a project summary and a welcome. Sometimes people come to your roadmap immediately. They don't start with your landing page. So just so they know where they are and what's going on. A little bit about how to get involved. A lot of times new contributors want to jump in right away. So linking to your contributing guidelines, things like that. And then finally, the star of the show is kind of this timeline. And sometimes it's not really a timeline. It's more of like a different status things, depending on how you like to project manage your work. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So going through these the first 2 sections, just welcome and orient visitors to your project. You can just take whatever you have in your README and copy it into your roadmap at the top if you have your roadmap as a separate file. This is just to help people understand where they are and sort of what's going on instead of just jumping straight into the roadmap. Next is how to get involved. So have links to code of conduct, contributing, really important. Again, this is optional if you're using a different feature or a different platform for road mapping. And then third is the timeline, the start of the roadmap. So this really organizes tasks that need to be completed around your project, around milestones or a state. So the way I encourage people to do it is just pick some milestones. I find that's the easiest, but I know some people prefer to use like a Kanban method. So you could use a state, just saying like, this is what needs to be done, what we're doing now, and what's done, rather than using milestones. So it depends on your working style and sort of your team and how you want to manage things. So to go into this a little bit deeper for milestones, these can be project status. You often see a milestone for like release 1.2, release 1.3. You could even be a MVP release or feature release. So project status goals. These can be a date or an event. What do we need to do before Hacktoberfest gets here? What do we need to do before our local community hackathon? Or it can be timeframes. If you're really stuck, you can just say short term, medium term, long term, or you can do that Kanban method with the needs to be done, doing now, already done. But pick a few milestones, add that to your timeline, and then for each milestone, list the tasks that need to be done. And then if you can, include as much information in that task so that a newcomer can get involved, especially if you want newcomers to do these tasks. If it's something that you know you're going to be doing and you don't want anyone else to do it, it's still good to document it just so people know what's going on, but you don't have to answer all these questions. But talk about what needs to be done, what success looks like, pointers to get started. And then I really like to add why this task is important. This is a great way to reinforce your vision. So you can say that this work will help us, I can't think of a vision right now, but will help all these new community jump in that couldn't use it before. So I did want to spend most of this actually looking at some examples on GitHub and just how people are doing their roadmaps. So first, let's look at TensorFlow Lite. They actually use a separate file. So they just have a roadmap.md file in their repository. So TensorFlow is a really popular AI framework. And this is the Lite version. So they have a roadmap that they just update ever so often. This is almost a year old, so this might not be the most current, but they break it down into different areas of the project. So they have usability and then everything that they plan on doing for usability. You scroll down, they have performance, what they plan to do with performance, optimization, portability. So this is pretty good. The downside is if I wanted to help with one of these, it's not linked out to an issue or anything. I would probably encourage you to link these to issues so that people can come in and contribute. It also doesn't say if some of these are already being worked on or what needs help. But this is still one way that you can do a roadmap, just create a file. And I do think this is one of the hardest ways to keep updated because you have to keep editing a file. On the next one here, the React project. It's a really big project, but they have a React server components roadmap for Next.js. So this is interesting because they use GitHub discussions, which is a newer feature in GitHub. But they have a little current status section, and they have this checklist that links out to either other discussion notes or different issues. So you can see the ones that are checked off for issues, the other ones that I guess they're still discussing are discussions. And then the roadmap itself, they have little milestones, and it basically says, hey, we are in this alpha unstable phase. We are here. And this is important, especially for users coming in, just to know that this is not production ready, so they understand the state that your project is in. And they also link out, this is interesting, they link out to an actual GitHub project for those extra details. So if I click on this, the GitHub project, this one is a great tool if you like those Kanban boards. So they have this to do, and they have 10 issues here. Some of these are just text written in the Kanban board, but some of these are actual issues. So if I wanted to, I can click on this issue. I can see it's already assigned to someone. Someone's planning on working on this. And there's more discussion there. I can look at the ones that don't have an assignment. So yeah, and then I can link out to the actual issue. So it's a nice way to answer all those questions for new contributors, but still in a nice way to view it overall. We'll look at React 18. This is interesting because they actually write a blog post for every release that's coming up. I think for previous versions, they called it the roadmap for React 16. This one, they just call it the plan. This is nice if you have the bandwidth to write a blog post for every single release that comes up, which might be a lot. But they write a really nice readable blog post just so people know what to expect for this next release. And then they always link it out to, here it's at the bottom, I think. Yeah, they link out to the working group, which it's back to the GitHub discussions. So we already saw this a bit. And then, yeah, it talks through alpha is complete, beta is complete, and you can see a little bit more information. The next is Kubernetes. They actually use issues and milestones. I don't know if they're still doing this all the time or consistently, but this is for version 1.25. This is the milestone for that. And then inside this milestone, it has both pull requests and issues that need to be completed for version 1.25 to be launched. So you can see they've already closed 233 issues and there's still 37 open, and you can go through, you can see most of these have been assigned already, but this one here isn't assigned. It actually has the help wanted button or label. So if I was a new contributor, I might click on this one and then I can see all those extra informations on like, why is this needed? So that's going back to the vision, tying that back to the vision. And I can go down and the bot actually gives me those guidelines saying like how I should be contributing. I can click to read a little bit more around help wanted. I'm not logged into GitHub on here. That's funny. Okay. And then I guess we already saw a project board, but Homebrew is an interesting project that also uses a project board. So just wanted to, I did that really fast, but I just wanted to leave you with a few tips on road mapping. Roadmaps do work best as a living document. I've seen a lot of projects put a lot of effort into creating this beautiful roadmap and then they just never update it afterwards. So then it's completely useless after like 2 weeks. So use whatever tool you can keep updated and publicly accessible. So if you're already using, say Trello personally, just make a Trello board that's public and link to that. Don't bother trying to add to your, add more things to try to keep updated to your tool set. As your community grows, maybe you'll need to move somewhere else so that it's somewhere where more people that you're working with can take a look at. But if you're just starting, use whatever you already have and what you know you can keep updated. Yeah, and it's best to have this sort of high level overview and then link to details. So I like the milestones or the project views where you can click and then you'll find the issue and then it has all this discussion, all this information. Because yeah, different audiences will have different wants. Like users will just want to know, like, is this alpha stage or is this production ready? Whereas a new contributor might really want to know, like, what file should I look at to fix this problem? So making sure you can provide all those views is really helpful. So that's my super fast, then further reading, but I would look at the curriculum that Alex shared. I think it's built off of this one, it looked like, the Start Your Roadmap from the Open Leadership Training Series. But opensource.com also has an interesting article on managing your open source product roadmap. That's what I have here. I'm happy to talk more about long-term projects if you have any questions or have a little bit of a discussion. I'll stop sharing. I know I went fast, but I was like, oh no, if Alex is already doing this.
No worries. And I'm sorry that I left it in the document. We are creating the copies and so on. And somebody has to talk about this in the next cohort. Thank you very much. And there are a lot of things I will not talk about because I'm lacking maybe also a bit the experience. And I really liked also the many examples. So maybe I should introduce this into my presentation as well. But I want to open the discussion. Please unmute yourself if you have any questions about road mapping and any other questions for Abby as well. Please go ahead.
I'll go ahead. For software and GitHub, I think it's quite easy because the target audience is quite clear. I don't know much about GitHub, but I guess that now. Because mostly about software. But if we want to invite a broader audience, like whatever people want to contribute, could be artists, could be lawyers. So do you have experience from a more interdisciplinary field or a suggestion which way would be appropriate there?
Yeah, and I think GitHub can still work pretty well. I know it's been gaining more traction around things like designers, And they have made it a little bit more user-friendly for these other fields. I would say just that's why we recommend having that like welcome at the beginning, just so people understand where they're going. I don't know. This is a tough thing to do in open source, getting people that are not coders involved. And I'd say just like in your issue or wherever you are, if you're in Trello, sometimes it is easier to be using something like Trello or even just a Google Doc. If you're working with, I found with educators actually, like just using a shared Google Doc that just had a few links at the top, and then you, especially just for a single event, that worked really well. You might need to tailor how you approach things for those audiences. But ideally, as they start contributing, they'll get more used to where you're actually doing the work so that you don't have to maintain things two places. And that can work. So what I've seen work is like having that Google Doc that links to the issues. So the Google Doc's like a nice entry point where they can come in and sort of understand what's going on. But then if they want more details, they have to go to GitHub or they have to go to GitLab or wherever you're managing your project. Then they'll get a bit more used to it. They'll create that account. And there are a lot of tutorials nowadays to make it a bit more user-friendly. But yeah, that's the best advice I have there.
Sorry, may I follow up that question related? Have you ever seen, Abby, anybody do roadmaps on forum threads or something like that?
Yeah. I've seen that quite a bit. I think in Discourse, people will do that, or they'll post a version of the roadmap there and sort of use the forum thread to just ask for feedback from the community. Like, hey, is this where you want to go? If they're willing to change the roadmap at all. Yeah. Okay, but then then linking out from there for more details. Yeah.
Because this could be like a good place to get visibility as well, right? Like if you already have a community and a forum, you just post it there and so on. Okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I really liked what you said about that you should also try and reach the people where they are and use, for example, for educators, Google Docs and so on. So I want to highlight that. So this is important. Just throw out nets and then drag them in, and then they will also use your platform where your main stuff is lying. Simon, you have a question?
Wait, now it slipped my attention because I was listening to it. It will come back in a moment.
Okay. I'll say in terms of longer term projects, because I know that was the title for this. I find what's really important is that getting buy-in from stakeholders piece. So using that roadmap to show to like for open leaders when I was building that out, to show to executives like why this is important, and then showing the impact of the different steps in the roadmap, just saying like, because we can grow exponentially with the mentorship model, we'll reach like this many people in these countries. Being able to highlight those things, that's where a roadmap can be really powerful. Simon, do you remember your question?
Yeah. Yeah, for the roadmap, which tools for governance or which methods for governance did you find interesting? Because if you're going on a journey together, it might be interesting to have decision mechanisms to decide which way to go, or how far you can involve or want to involve the community, or how far they want to be involved.
Yeah. And I think the roadmap is a great way to start involving the community and getting people involved. I think it does make sense to have a governance model in place before you do the roadmap, so that people don't get surprised when they're like, oh, I can't change the direction of this roadmap. And they're like, no, I'm in charge. This is where it's going. So writing down that like these are who the decision makers are, how they become a decision maker, how decisions are made, making sure all of that's really clear. I know that's one regret I have from actually doing the Open Leaders program. I didn't put a lot around governance models in there in the curriculum. But I think nowadays, especially with more around like code of conduct enforcement, I think it's important to have that trust and just to have your governance documented somewhere. So I agree with you. I think the roadmap is a great place to open up that governance, just like to help empower people to help make decisions in the project. But I think it is important to write down how that happens. So saying that like people generally won't ask to change the roadmap. I think people assume that the roadmap is sort of set in stone, unless you explicitly say that, hey, this roadmap is built collaboratively with this community. Then they get excited and they want to get involved.
So, is there any other question for Abby? Otherwise, so who actually already has a roadmap of our projects right here? Simon. Go.
We have a draft roadmap. But yeah, it depends very much. We also had a longer discussion with our mentor, because we're going from exactly the opposite approach that most makers go. We first get a broad overview. We see who can be on board, who wants to be on board, and then we will start making. Usually it goes the other way around.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is our approach. But yeah, the roadmap would be pretty much about getting started, building a design, having an idea for a design, and yeah. So yeah, we are prototyping there.
That's a good start, right?
Yeah.
So I'm being a bit mean now. So how about the other projects? How about Cybots, Sheldon? Can you give like a short comment about like how Cybots, for example, like already built maybe a roadmap or wants to build a roadmap? Do you have a place for that? Somebody dropped out.
I think it was Pyrus.
Yeah, it could be. He's out there at the machine, probably.
Anybody else would like to add something, or like open the camera and unmute to just share with us about the roadmap? Even if it's a draft, even if you just begun, like impressions and questions that you have, please make sure to use the opportunity that Abby is here, because she has like better insights for sure than we do. So for Simon, if you want also to keep asking questions, that's also fine.
What you can do, you can also leave comments if you don't want to speak, or if you can't speak at the moment, you can also leave us comments in the document.
Yeah.
Just right there. I will leave a comment field. So if that's not the case, so we can also forward questions to you, Abby. You can link your profile page or your personal web page. So I think you have also the contacts, your contacts on there, like your email address, I think. So people can, if they have questions, maybe also write you directly, if that's fine with you.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just putting my info in there.
I would have a question what might be the space here to ask. I haven't been using GitHub a lot now, but I think, Abby, you're probably now already quite familiar with GitHub. How is there being maybe more space being created for open source hardware? Is it part?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with open source hardware actually, which is why I was so happy that like Andre and Alex and Julieta and everyone were putting this together. So yeah, I don't know how it is for open source hardware. I think Alex or Andre, you might have a better idea.
So it keeps improving, and I think maybe it's not really, like, I mean, it's maybe not the very, very first thought that you would use maybe GitHub for an open hardware project, but it's actually a good place because many projects also contain, for example, 3D models, and there's now a feature to, for example, show a preview of 3D models, for example, for whatever housing or something like this. And also many open hardware projects nowadays also contain like parts of software. So you need, if you have a microcontroller or something like this, you need to program the microcontroller, which might not be the case for your project, Simon, but others also use this to share, obviously, then the code. So it's a mixture of everything. Abby, for you, so we are platform agnostic. We try at least, and we are using the GOSH forum, the Gathering for Open Science Hardware forum, to collect the information and also track the cohort and the projects of this cohort. But we are also experimenting here. And yeah, well, GitHub is one platform which you could use. And what I like about GitHub, like my personal opinion, is that you have all this project management features built in, which is really nice. All right. If there is no other question or comments, Andre, what do you think? I think we can end this part of our call. And Abby, thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for all the insights and also for the great examples. And if you like, you can stay. The next thing we will discuss is a bit we will talk about time management and the challenges about time management. But as I said, you are also free to leave. Of course.
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump, but thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. And it was great, hearing your questions and meeting your community. I'm excited to see what you've been building here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, and thank you again. Bye. All righty, let's see. Maybe only the three of us are now discussing this question. So what I want to give you now is also just like a short, some practical tips. I think Abby gave you a really, really, really nice overview. And as I said, I think the examples, this is something really good to see how other projects are doing that. And we highly recommend you to just also look at other projects, as always. Just check out other projects and see how they are doing it. And if you like something, copy it. That's how it works. What I want to add as a really practical tip is to plan, to do reverse planning. We have this also in our curriculum, but just try to think of maybe the end of your project or a certain times, for example, an event, a date, a deadline, and then plan from there. Because it helps you to just have some certain time points, as I said, and then evaluate also how much time you will need, and then you can also build your roadmap from there. It's easier because usually you don't know where to start, right? So usually you should have at least one deadline or something. And if you don't have a deadline, make a deadline and use something external. Like, for example, Abby was sharing that there's the MOSFest. The MOSFest is also a nice place to share your project, because there is a really broad audience joining, and it will help you maybe also to get more contributors from all domains of the internet, because you can find everything in the internet, and Mozilla and the MOSFest is basically a collection of all the nice things which you can find in the internet. What I want to talk to you about is about time management. I will quickly share the slideshow. 1 second, share my screen. Here we go. You should see the presentation now again. And what I want to talk to you about, or what I want you to discuss, is what are your challenges with time management? So what do you find hard to time? So where do you just don't know how much time you will need? And if you think back, because you probably already were planning some things at least, and you were planning progress and so on, what took more time than you thought it would? So please, you can also leave us comments there in the notes. You will have just a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, to think about it, and then please open your mic and talk to us. And I hope also one of the other projects, we have some here, please at least leave us some comments in the document, right? So we will read it. If you don't want to speak up, if you don't want to unmute yourself, just go ahead and write it in the docs. And I see already Michael typing there. Just go ahead. We can have some minutes now, silent thinking and typing.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that from the reviews that we got and the packages that you send to the experts, time is really one of the biggest issues all projects have. And this is the same for us as well. So really do use this time, maybe like you exchange ideas and tips and things that can be useful for getting more out of your time.
Already coming in some really interesting things.
I
Thank
like
you
the
very much.
troubleshooting one. Troubleshooting is always, I mean, for me, also the hardest to estimate. This is going to take half an hour and we'll be done. It's like 3 weeks later, I'm still troubleshooting something. Yeah. Yeah. And troubleshooting is common to Simon and Michael. I like the one from Nano as well. Developing user guides, right? It's always, at least the impression that I have, always hard to know how much detail and how to document things and so on. Which is the same for Huya. Maybe either Huya or Nano, do you guys want to share a little bit more? Because this seems to be a common thing for both of you as well. If you can, over just the mic.
Quickly stop the presentation again, so you.
Hi,
Hi, Nano.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, about this, I mean, for us, it's kind of difficult to make like a user guide because, I mean, we know what the tool can do, but we're not sure how the people is going to use it. So, and we don't have like an expert with us that knows a lot about using a soil chamber. So it's kind of, we're learning, and then we're kind to I don't know, from that learning we are kind of making these guides, but we're not really sure how people is going to use it. So we need to define at least like two final users, more or less, and say, okay, for this kind of use you should do this, and for this kind of use you should do this other thing, no? But it's not so easy at all. Because you need like to experiment with the tool, and that I mean, you need a lot of time to experiment. One thing is to build the tool, and a different thing is to like to test the tool. So I don't know, I'm thinking that maybe we need to like to provide this testing kits, and try to learn from other people experience, and then to, I don't know, have that, with that feedback, I think it's easier to understand how the people is going to use the tool, no, or something like that. I don't know, I'm just thinking in the open here.
Which is nice, and thank you very much for that. And yeah, I think you're doing all right if you are asking others and try to get more information and feedback. Yeah.
Maybe it's a good idea also to check other manuals for soil respiration chambers if they're available, right? And just try to see what they put in, right? In case you guys haven't done yet. As you can see, there is like a very, very common motto from what we say, which is a lot of the times is, what other people have done, maybe just try to copy that, which is the whole, like the old adage of like open source projects, don't reinvent the wheel, right? Maybe just like adapting and up one for what already exists is already like very good, right? Yeah, anybody has comments on documentation or suggestions for user guides or would like to add to that?
No, I think I'm realizing more and more how important documentation is, right? I mean, this is, yeah, this is the link between the reality, the physical, and the bit reality.
It absolutely is. And And you should put a lot of energy and time into documenting.
And also, I mean, how to bridge the gap between the different cultures of understanding. I mean, even the same type of culture, you have different types of understanding. Some people understand with images, some people understand more with texts or videos, or maybe you use 3 different ways to explain the same thing, right?
And yeah, if you, so with documentation, it's always like that. You should aim maybe for one way at least, but then if you can, build it also for other people, let's say for other user groups. And that's what you always should do. And that's what I can recommend to everybody who struggles with the documentation and also timing documentation. Set a specific time you want to spend on documentation and like build it up, like make it better each step. So have like a minimal viable documentation as we describe it also in our curriculum, and improve it as you go. Yeah? Just set aside like regularly time for documentation. That's what we as a program also recommend. And it's really hard. Documentation is maybe also the hardest part for open hardware projects. And I'm sorry, there is so much light coming in from this window, so I have to like turn the camera a bit so it's better. Anyway, Andre, do you want to add something to that?
No, unfortunately, I want to be the annoying guy that keeps track of time and say that we need to actually move on to the next topic, or just keep chatting about this and then skip the next topic. But I guess evaluating risks is a good one as well to talk about, right?
Yes, absolutely. Evaluating risk. So we don't want to dive really deep here. We also link quite nice resources there on our curriculum page. Evaluating risk is actually something where it basically also sums up like something like troubleshooting, right? Things which can go wrong and you now then have to troubleshoot. And what you can do to evaluate risks is also to look for external factors of the projects which are important for the project and also for the project progress in terms of the roadmap, but not only. Andre, do you want to like maybe also give an example from one of your projects, or
yes,
share some insights?
So yeah, so this is one that happens a lot of times inside universities, right? Because people don't properly document and train other people, right? So basically, oh, there is this one person in that lab that knows how to make this specific open hardware project work. But then for whatever reason, they leave the lab. So they finish their degree, they whatever, find a job and so on. And then that knowledge is lost, right? So one risk, I mean, it is a risk, right? Like for projects is where the knowledge about that project is concentrated, right? And so this is again, like going back to road mapping and documenting. In your roadmap, maybe it's a good thing to put milestones such as doing a workshop, teaching other people how to use this tool, which will at the same time help generate a community, but also distribute the knowledge about a certain project, right? Which is what we want in the end anyways. Yeah, I think this is a big one for me and for the projects here. I keep thinking, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, which projects are going to survive and which ones are going to have a hard time moving on? Because all the knowledge is concentrated in my head and not on a proper documented page somewhere, right?
For some things, it might seem like a good idea to be like on top of everything, but I mean, also from my experience, if you have somebody to replace you or your knowledge, it's always like a really good feeling, because you can, for example, get ill, and stay at home being sick and not worry about like everything. So that's why we also just as an example. So we are now 3 people for the Open Hardware Makers program, because we want to share also this workload and have less pitfalls, because all 3 of us dropping out at the same time is very unlikely. So this is our risk we evaluated and well, maybe prepared for.
Has
Other
anybody
external-
thought about risks and evaluating risks on their projects already and would like to share a couple of things, or?
So what we wanted to do is actually to have a breakout room, but now the time is a bit too short to talk about this in breakout rooms.
Yeah.
So what we want you to think about is like, what are your risks? For example, are you waiting for example, for any permission? There are some things, administrative things, which you need to, for example, to progress. If it's, for example, I'm just making up an example, a wildlife monitoring project, and you need to have access to a wildlife area. And then this is, for example, something where you have to wait for a permission to do that. And this might be, for example, a critical, like a pitfall or a critical moment. So please share. We see already people sharing like just some things in the notes. Please go ahead. You are also welcome to unmute.
I could go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, because we're aiming to empower people to make their own drinking water machines in the first phase. So of course it has a risk because the water needs to be safe. So we can solve this by asking ourselves the question: how can we empower them or give them knowledge or tools so that they can be sure that they have treated their water successfully?
Absolutely. You could also show by example. Yeah, yes, you said. I don't want to add more. I don't want to repeat what you said. I absolutely agree. That's a good idea. I see here, Nano is still typing funding on time of developer. Well, time is a problem by itself, right? I mean, we write a lot about timing and also about burnout in open source, because I mean, as we are running this project and also this program in our free time, and you might have the same issue. There is work coming up and you need to focus also on work, and you can't do both things. This is also a risk, having your proper work life basically killing your open project. Maybe you are lucky enough to also get this funded in a way. We hope at least that we can fund our time for the program at some point, at some time. But this is also something like a huge risk we actually have, for example, for our program. What do you think, Andre?
Yeah, so time and funding are big ones, right? And I think in the issue of funding, I guess people could start like we did, right? Like we set up this open collective and like the systems that allow you to get like micro dollars from people. I mean, not micro dollars, this is the wrong way to say it. People can donate like $1, $2 for your project. And then if you get enough of these, then you may be able to fund something or someone in your project and so on. But I guess this plugs out very well to what Abi said, right? Like if you do have a roadmap and you're showing milestones and you're showing like where things are going, then it's easier to tell people and convince people that they could throw some dollars your way to fund your work, right? I guess this is just more of a practical perspective on it, I guess. It's not easy. It's a lot of people building a lot of open source cool tools out there. And we're all kind of fighting for the same pool of other people who would fund open source projects, right? So yeah, it's not an easy task.
Yeah, and finding users, that's what Nano left also here in the document. Finding users and also finding contributors, because, well, also, yeah, scaling, that's also an important thing. I mean, sometimes if you gather more people helping with the project, this actually does not really correlate like with the speed you take up. More people don't do the same work as a multiply of the one person working on the project before, because people need to be managed and also contribution are necessary to be managed. Oh, sorry, I'm losing my English, so that's actually a good way to start ending the call. But first, do you still have any questions about the risk evaluation? Sorry. People on YouTube will have something to laugh about. All right, if not, you can always leave us questions, send us questions. I don't know, is there already a thread for this in the forum?
Not for this cohort call.
We will set up a thread for the forum where you can leave also some of your risks. If you do your risk assessment, yeah, you can share it there, because I think it's also nice to also get feedback from others. But I guess also like take your time and think about this. This is the very first step and the most important step, obviously, and be aware of it. This is also really important. Please read our abstract, our parts, our curriculum about time management, and also, well, don't kill yourself by like trying too hard at some point. Sometimes it's still usually a like a voluntary project, and manage your time like in general, not only for your open hardware projects, and keep your sanity. All right, with this, we will close the call. Next steps, and I already see a mistake I already made because I did not change this slide. Make sure you have scheduled your meeting for next week with your mentor. There is obviously no cohort call. We see each other not on May the 18th, but on
June 1st.
June 1st. Awesome. And you will get an email next week, and it's not week 8, it will be week 10. And it's not road mapping, but I don't remember anymore, but I think it's communication, right? No, licenses and standards. Next time is licenses and standards, and community and communication will be afterwards, the last part. Because we are then heading towards also our global sprint, where we encourage you to put a bit more energy into also reaching out to others. As always, you can contact us with any questions you have with ohwmakers@gmail.com or in the GOSH forum, obviously. You will receive also a special email next week with the package, the feedback package we put together for you from the expert review. All right, with this, I want to end. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? If not, you are free to leave, and see you next week.
Thank you.